Ladies and gentlemen, brace yourselves because what unfolded in this courtroom was unlike anything fans of Sister Wives had ever imagined. The man who once stood as the patriarch of America's most controversial polygamous family, Kody Brown, was not walking into a family discussion, not sitting in a living room for TLC cameras, but instead facing his wives across a cold, wooden courtroom. And this time they weren't his partners. They were his accusers. The narrative starts with a gavel bang. Reporters sit forward, onlookers catch their breath. Kody walks in, shoulders back, still radiating the self-assurance of a man who used to think that he could never be questioned. His voice was law within the Brown home for years. But today, beneath the harsh light of the fluorescent bulbs in the courtroom, his voice shook. Why? Because Meri, Janelle, Christine, and even Robyn, the wife who everybody believed would stand up for him until the end, had turned against him. Their testimonies, their evidence, their truths, all painted a picture of betrayal, deception, and a man who had run out of alibis. To comprehend the severity of this scandal, you must recall how it all started. Kody Brown was once famed, or at least notorious for introducing polygamy into America's living rooms. With his 4 wives and 18 kids, he sold the world a tale of togetherness, religion, and family. TLC cameras shadowed their every step, introducing a man navigating marriages, kids, and mayhem with a smile. But behind the scenes, fissures widened each year. Christine became fed up with being dismissed. Janelle became angry at fiscal mishandling. Meri became isolated, made to feel like an outsider in her own marriage. And Robyn, the wife Kody formally wed when he divorced Meri, gradually came to see the pedestal she was put on as not about affection, but domination. Those cracks eventually grown into a canyon of betrayal. What friends and fans witnessed as family fights were only hints of a storm raging behind the scenes. When Christine first stood up in the courtroom, her voice pierced the quiet. "I was quiet for years," she said firmly. "But today the truth is told." She opened up papers, secret bank accounts, covert land transfers, and agreements that indicated Kody had been stealing money from them behind their backs. Gasps ran through the room. Christine wasn't merely accusing him of emotional infidelity, she was accusing him of financial fraud. Janelle followed, offering proof that her name had been taken off land titles without her permission. "We were going to start a life together," she stated, "but he started one without me." Her measured tone cut more effectively than any yell could have. And then Meri. For years fans viewed her as reserved, aloof, even submissive. But in that courtroom, she spoke up. "He made me feel like I wasn't a wife anymore," she testified. "But while he was wiping me out, he was making commitments to another woman outside of this family." And then the one no one anticipated, Robyn, broke her silence. The wife Kody preferred, the one he had made legal, shook her head. "Even I was deceived. Even I was manipulated." Her crying shut the case. If even Robyn turned, Kody had no one left. Kody attempted to battle back. He banged on the table. "This is preposterous. I gave up everything for this family." But his arguments sounded empty. The judge remained unmoved. The crowd wasn't persuaded, and his wives, now together, were merciless. Christine exposed a ownership transfer of $75,000 into an account that had not been disclosed. Janelle authenticated emails and emails indicating manipulation of ownership rights. Meri opened up messages that indicated a hidden relationship outside of the family. Robyn shook her head in disbelief, as if realizing at that precise moment that the man she stood up for was not the man she believed she married. For the first time in his life, Kody Brown was pinned against a wall. His charm, his bluster, his talent for spinning any story for the cameras, none of it counted in front of the judge's gavel and his wives' collective voices. The judge leaned in, his voice slicing through the chatter. "Mr. Brown, your image might count to the cameras. But here, only the truth counts. And the truth is damning." Kody slumped forward, his shoulders weighed down. The judge reminded everyone that this wasn't about contracts or about money. It was about trust, betrayal, and manipulation. The wives, side by side for the first time in years, looked at one another with solidarity. For once, they weren't love competitors. They weren't fighting over scraps of attention. They were women seeking justice. The turning point was when Christine, the wife who had been the first to walk away years ago, rose again. "We gave you everything. Our youth, our loyalty, our trust. But you gave us lies. Today we say enough." The crowd burst into cheers. The judge banged his gavel like thunder. "This court will weigh all evidence. But let it be made clear, your actions have consequences." Outside, cameras clicked as the wives marched arm in arm, their heads held high. Kody stayed behind, his once mighty reputation in tatters. The headlines the next morning screamed, "Breaking scandal, Kody Brown exposed in courtroom showdown as wives turn against him." This wasn't merely another family brawl. This was an implosion of an empire founded on image and control. For years fans had speculated whether Kody's favoritism, manipulation and egotism would ultimately catch up with him. Now the world knew. The wives who had been separated grew strong through their unity. They were no longer women on a reality TV show. They were voices to be heard. And Kody, the man who had thought he could have it all, the wives, the children, the fame, was now a cautionary tale. Pride can build you up, but betrayal can bring you down. So, as we begin this tale, keep this in mind: what had started as a TV family became a courtroom scandal. What had been a reality show turned into a reality check. And the man who had it all lost everything in the slam of a gavel. This is not merely a courtroom drama. It's a tale of betrayal, of women taking back control, and of a patriarch at last confronting reality. And once the dust settles, this much is certain: the Brown family will never be the same. The crack of a gavel resounded through the courtroom. Bang, like thunder rumbling through the silence. In an instant, all eyes were on the man at the center of the tempest. Kody Brown, his golden curls which once epitomized the confidence of a television patriarch, appeared rumpled under the unforgiving fluorescent lights. Those days of stomping through family scenes with a swaggering smile were over. Today that smile buckled. "Court is now in session," the judge declared, his voice echoing around the room. The court was filled to capacity. Reporters occupied the benches, cameras were piled in the doorway, and nosy spectators huddled in hushed conversation. It wasn't a mere legal hearing. It was a spectacle. After all, the individual on trial wasn't anyone ordinary. He was Kody Brown, the face of TLC's Sister Wives, a show that brought polygamy into living rooms across America. For more than a decade, fans watched his 4 wives juggle jealousy, loyalty, heartbreak, and faith. But now the storyline had shifted. The lights, the drama, the tension, it was no longer a reality TV set. It was a courtroom. And the stakes were higher than they had ever been. Kody came forward, his attorney by his side. He attempted to keep his shoulders back, his chin up, but there was something decidedly different about him. His swagger had vanished, taken over by a stiffening, as though he already knew the walls were closing in. On the other side of the aisle were Meri, Janelle, Christine, and Robyn. 4 women once known as sister wives. 4 women who at one time competed with one another for his attention, his approval, his crumbs of affection. But today they weren't competing with each other. They were united. And that cohesion was more frightening to Kody than anything he had ever seen. "Ladies and gentlemen," the judge started, "this is not a trial regarding polygamy, or religion, or television reality. This is about being held accountable. Mr. Brown, your wives aren't here as your wives. They're here as your accusers." The words hit the room like a lightning bolt. Reporters scribbled furiously, the sound of pen scratching paper competing with gasps. Kody's jaw tightened. He leaned toward his lawyer, whispering something, but his eyes betrayed the truth. He was rattled. This was the moment he had feared. The day the carefully built image of the family man would be stripped away. For years Kody had claimed to be the faithful head of a plural family. He was the man who said he kept it all together. Even though season after season, viewers watched as the cracks widened. But the reality had finally clawed its way into the light. Today the story wasn't his to tell. Christine, Janelle, Meri, and Robyn weren't wives anymore. They were witnesses. And they were ready to talk. Christine was the first wife to lock eyes with Kody. Her face bore years of hurt, but also a flame of newfound energy. She had walked out on him years before, announcing loudly that she could no longer survive in a loveless marriage. Fans recalled her tearful tell-all on Sister Wives, where she confessed to being finished being invisible. But if the viewers thought that was the end of her journey, they were mistaken. Christine had arrived armed, with proof, with strength, with a voice she would not quiet. Her fingers gripped a fat folder of papers. Bank statements, deeds to property, promises in writing that had been broken. She had not yet spoken, but her very presence cried out in a voice louder than words. The truth is coming. And Kody knew it. He glanced at the folder, then at Christine, as if pleading her silently to desist. But Christine's lips were clamped into a tight line. This time she would not be halted. A seat away from Christine was Janelle, serene and tranquil, but serene and tranquil was a guise. Janelle was always the quiet one, the rational one, the wife who was more concerned about business strategy than love drama. But her serenity wasn't defeat, it was tact. She cradled emails in her lap, documentation of land transfers, confirmation that her name had been removed unbeknownst from papers associated with the family's valuable land, Coyote Pass. She was not a woman who yelled or screamed, but her silence had an edgier bite. When she spoke, it wouldn't be in fury, it would be in pinpoint accuracy. And that precision would cut deeper than any outburst could. Then there was Meri, the first wife. The one Kody had legally divorced to marry Robyn. For years she had been portrayed as lonely, isolated, desperate to find her place in the family. Many fans pitied her. Some even criticized her for staying in a loveless situation. But today, Meri's eyes glimmered with something different: resolve. She did not come here to beg for love. She did not come here to scrap over crumbs. She came here to remind him, in the world, silence is not a form of weakness. In her hands, she clasped messages. Words written by Kody to another woman, vows he made while his wives waited at home for him. These were not rumors. They were proof, and Meri was about to share them. At last, the focus in the courtroom shifted to Robyn. Robyn had been Kody's favorite wife, the one who got the most attention, the most affection, the legal marriage for years. She had been the wife everyone thought would stand by him to the very end. But her head was bent, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. There were tears shining in her eyes. When at last she looked up, it wasn't with defiance. It was with sorrow. Even Robyn, the wife he had imagined would never betray him, was here against him. Kody's chest had expanded and collapsed in a swift motion. He looked at her, pleadingly near. But Robyn shook her head very slightly. Her lips pursed into a thin line. She was not going to rescue him this time. The air in the courtroom thickened with every second. Reporters murmured into their recorders. Fans in the gallery had their mouths covered. They could not conceal their shock. One journalist leaned over to another and whispered, "He's toast. If even Robyn is against him, he's toast." Kody shifted uncomfortably in his seat. For once, his confidence, his tool on camera, his defense in interviews was failing him. His wives were no longer split. They were not fighting over him. They were against him, united. And there was nothing that frightened him more. The judge cleared his throat. "We will hear evidence from both sides in due course. But let it be understood, this court is not a set for your TV show. It is a forum for truth, and truth will not be silenced." Kody's fists were clenched. His lawyer spoke quietly in his ear, but he hardly heard. His head was spinning. How did it ever come to this? He had worked a decade, maybe more, to build his reputation, to create the story of a man on top, the head of a family held together by religion. And now the image was shattering, piece by piece before the cameras. And the women he once ruled with charm, guilt, or manipulation, were about to bring down what was left. But the twist is, this was just the start. What Christine, Janelle, Meri, and Robyn were about to expose would destroy not only Kody's defense, but his legacy entirely. The judge fidgeted with his papers. Christine shifted the folder in her lap. Janelle gripped her documents tightly. Meri took a slow breath to steel herself. Robyn brushed away a tear from her cheek, and Kody, he sat immobile. His gaze darted between them, seeking a glimmer of vulnerability, a fissure he could drive a wedge into. But there was none. This wasn't the ancient family dynamic in which he could play one wife against another. This wasn't a reality show in which he could edit the narrative in confessionals. This was a courtroom. And in this courtroom, the truth was his wives. And that truth was about to be released. The audience moved forward in their seats. Cameras snapped outside the doors. Social media hummed with updates. Kody Brown courtroom showdown begins. The judge nodded to Christine. You may proceed. Christine stood up slowly, her every step ringing out across the wooden floor. She turned and faced Kody, her voice shaking but unyielding. And with her first word, she broke the silence. And trust me, you won't believe the evidence she placed on the table. Evidence that would prove Kody Brown's secrets went deeper than anybody ever dreamed. Christine Brown stood up from her chair slowly. The courtroom fell silent. The impact of her footsteps reverberated against the glossy wooden floor. All eyes were on her. The reporters, the audience, even Kody, who leaned forward in a combination of fear and incredulity. Christine had been depicted for years as the emotional wife, the one who yearned for love and affection but never quite got it. Sister Wives fans recalled her sorrow on television. The evening that she admitted she was finished with living in a loveless marriage. That moment had broken hearts across America. But Christine was no longer the sorrowful wife. She was something much more threatening to Kody. She was a woman armed with the truth. She had a fat folder, its corners creased, its papers meticulously arranged. She walked up to the stand, flexed the microphone, and caught her breath. Then she started talking. I was silent for years. Christine started, her voice shaking but firm. I smiled in front of the cameras. I performed my role. I convinced myself it was all for the kids. But behind the curtains, behind the pretense, there were secrets. Secrets that Kody never wanted the world to learn. The courtroom hushed in. Christine unfolded the folder and waved the first page. This, she said, is evidence of an undisclosed bank account. A bank account Kody established in his sole name. Money was transferred here, money that was to be for our family, for our children. $75,000. Poof. There were gasps throughout the room. A reporter's pen cracked in half as they wrote. Kody shifted uncomfortably in his seat. That's not true, he barked, but the judge raised a hand. Mr. Brown, you'll have your chance to respond. Let her continue. Christine nodded, gaining confidence. Years we trusted him. Years we believed him when he told us all the money was for family good. But while we were budgeting food, while we were tallying dollars for rent and electricity, he was secreting money. Her voice broke, not in weakness, but in the heavy burden of betrayal. Do you have any idea, she demanded of the room, what it's like to see your children do without, while your husband quietly accumulates a fund in secret from you? Silence. Nobody could respond. But Christine wasn't done. What she brought forward next would hit at the foundation of Kody's meticulously built image. Christine turned over to the next series of papers. And then there is Kody Pass. A silence fell in the courtroom. Everyone recognized the name. Kody Pass, the vast property in Arizona that had been the hub of the Brown family's aspirations. It was to be their legacy, their future, the location where each wife would have a house of her own, constructed side by side, a testament to their harmony. But Christine's eyes blazed with anger as she waved the deeds. This land was never about being together. Kody said it was ours. Ours as a family. But these documents speak differently. Names deleted, signatures omitted. He republished the ownership without us knowing. The judge leaned forward. Are you saying these deeds were modified? Christine nodded resolutely. Yes, Your Honor. My name was erased. Janelle's name was erased. It wasn't an oversight. It was intentional. Whispers ran through the audience. Viewers of the show understood how much they loved Kody Pass. To find out it had been manipulated behind their backs? It was unbelievable. Kody slammed his fist on the table. That's a lie. You don't comprehend how convoluted this is. But Christine didn't blink. She stared at him, her tone firm. We perfectly understand. You lied. The judge nodded to Janelle. She rose slowly, her demeanor serene but unyielding. If Christine had been the storm, Janelle was the ice. I am not a person who speaks much. Janelle started, her tone level. But when I do, I speak with facts. She laid out her proof on the table. A chain of emails, printed and underlined. These are exchanges between Kody and a real estate agent. In these exchanges, he issues explicit commands to have my name taken off property documents. He states, and I quote, "This land should stay under my control." The words hung in the air. Years, Janelle went on. I invested in that land. I invested money in it. I had faith in his leadership. But behind my back, he was scheming to steal it all for himself. Her voice cracked a little, not with rage, but with hurt. He said I was his partner. But partners don't erase one another. Partners don't cut each other out of their future. Fingers of reporters shot across keyboards. Headlines were even being generated. Janelle reveals secret emails in courtroom bombshell. But if Christine and Janelle's witnessing stunned the courtroom, what was about to be said would leave it reeling. For Meri, the wife that many believed had no fight left, was about to speak. Meri stood up. She had not uttered a word to that point. Her eyes pointed down, her hands clasped together. But today, as she strode toward the stand, there was a flame in her step. For years, she started, I was treated like I didn't exist. Like I was no longer a wife. No longer a part of this family. But being silent does not mean being blind. She brandished her proof, a pile of printed messages. The courtroom hummed with intrigue. These are emails Kody sent to another woman. Affection, promises. He said she was his future. People gasped. A woman in the crowd covered her mouth. A reporter dropped his pen. Meri's voice shook but remained firm. While I was sitting at home, asking myself if I even existed, he was giving another woman his heart. He led me to think I was the issue. But the reality is, he had already moved on. Kody's face reddened. That's not right. You don't realize. But the judge stopped him with a stare. Mr. Brown, your turn will come. Meri's eyes glistened with tears, but her shoulders stood tall. For the first time in years, she wasn't invisible. She wasn't forgotten. She was heard. And then came the moment no one expected. The judge turned to Robyn. The courtroom leaned forward. Surely, Robyn would defend him. She was his legal wife, his favorite, his chosen partner. But Robyn's lips trembled as she rose. Her face streamed with tears. Her hands shook as she held her statement. I thought I was different, she whispered. I thought he loved me. I believed in him. Her voice cracked. But even I was fooled. Even I was used. The courtroom came to a standstill. Robyn's tears flowed unencumbered. I stood up for him for years. For the others, for the world. I thought I was doing it for my marriage. But now I see, I wasn't his wife. I was his pawn. The gallery gasped in unison. Even Christine, Janelle, and Meri glanced at Robyn, with rounded eyes. For the first time, the four women were united on the same side. And Kody, it was the ultimate betrayal. But just when you thought the wives had given you everything, Christine leaned forward again. And what she drew out of her folder came close to freezing Kody's heart dead. Christine went back to the witness stand. Her folder still full of papers. She produced a final bit of evidence. A taped statement from one of Kody's older children. The courtroom monitors flashed to life as the sound played. It was the voice of a child, unvarnished with emotion. Dad said he'd give us a home. He said we'd never be apart. And then he said to me, you have to make a choice. Him or mom. I don't think he made me do it. Sobs echoed throughout the courtroom. Not from Christine, not from Janelle, not from Meri, not even from Robyn. They came from the audience, from viewers who had watched this family for years, who now understood the extent of the deception. Kody blanched. His fists were clenched at his sides, his jaw rigid, but his eyes betrayed him. He was shaken. The judge's gavel came down. Order! Order in the courtroom. He looked at Kody with narrowed eyes. Mr. Brown, the testimonies we've heard today are damning. This isn't a matter of miscommunication or misunderstanding. This is betrayal, emotional, financial, and personal. The court will weigh this evidence carefully. He turned to the wives. You may be dismissed for now, but know this, the courage you've shown today has not gone unnoticed. The wives returned to the bench. Together. For the first time, rivalry, jealousy, and favoritism were not the issue. Justice was, and for Kody, his empire of domination was collapsing. But bear in mind, This was just session 2. The actual breakdown of Kody Brown's defense was still to come. As Christine, Janelle, Meri and Robyn sat collectively, heads held high, the cameras outside the courthouse hummed with activity. Headlines were already taking shape. Kody Brown's wives expose him in courtroom bombshell. Robyn joins the others. Kody betrayed by favorite wife. $75,000 secret account revealed in sister wives scandal. Kody sat alone at the defense table, his attorney whispering urgently in his ear, but no whisper could override the sound of the truth that had just been uttered. His wives were no longer his wives. They were his accusers, his adversaries, his reckoning. And session 2 had merely just scratched the surface. The courtroom was abuzz with rumors after the dramatic testimonies of Christine, Janelle, Meri, and even Robyn. Journalists were firing off dispatches, followers were live tweeting reactions, and the charge inside those 4 walls felt electric, like history itself was before their very eyes. But at the center of it was seated Kody Brown, holding on to the table so hard his knuckles became white. His wives had just taken apart his reputation, chip by chip, unveiling hidden accounts, forged property deeds, secret messages, and even a breach of trust with their children. And now, everyone's attention turned to him. The judge cleared his throat. "Mr. Brown, you may now reply." Kody sprang from his seat so fast it scraped against the floor, the screech ringing through the room. His face was red with anger, his eyes burning with rage. "This is appalling," he bellowed, his voice shaking from the emotion of his own rage. "These women, these so-called wives are distorting the facts. They are resentful, they are retaliatory, and they wish to destroy me because I decided to go on with my life." Gasps issued from the courtroom. Christine slowly shook her head, her face serene but firm. Janelle's lips puckered into a thin line. Meri folded her arms, unimpressed. Robyn dropped her gaze, tears streaming down her face. But Kody wasn't finished. He jabbed his finger at Christine. "You left me years ago. You left this family behind. And now you want to stand here and play like you're the victim? You're the one who gave up on us." Christine didn't blink. She merely stared back at his glare with quiet strength, the kind of strength born after years of pain. But the angrier Kody got, the more the cracks were visible. His rage wasn't working for him. It was killing him. Kody next grabbed Janelle. "And you always loved money more than love. You never loved building a marriage. You only loved land and property. Don't pretend this is betrayal. It's greed." Janelle's eyebrows shot up, her serene demeanor making his tantrum appear all the more childish. "Greed?" she murmured. "I invested in the land. I gave up my savings for us to have a future. Greed, Kody, was never about me. It was about you." The onlookers murmured in sympathy. Even the judge's face paled. But Kody wasn't done. His desperation compelled him further. He turned to face Meri, his voice laced with venom. "And you checked out years ago. You flirted with another man on the internet, remember? Don't pretend like you're innocent. You cheated on me years before I ever looked at anyone else." The courtroom gasped once more. Meri's face turned white for a moment. The pain of old wounds reopened. But then, slowly she stood her ground. "You're right, Kody," she replied softly. "I was lonely. I made mistakes. But I owned mine. I admitted mine. The difference is, you never admit yours. You just keep them hidden until the truth explodes." The room burst with whispers again. Robyn sat silently amidst the commotion, tears falling onto her shirt. Kody spun around to her, his voice changing from angry to desperate. "Robyn, you know better than anyone the truth. Tell them I'm not this beast they're painting me to be. Tell them." The room caught its breath. Robyn raised her gaze, red and puffy with tears. For an instant Kody believed she might indeed stand up for him. But then, in the gentlest, most heartbreaking whisper, she murmured, "I can't, Kody. Not anymore." The sentences crushed him like a sledgehammer to the chest. His lips dropped open, his body swaying as if the floor had been yanked from under him. The audience gasped, realizing that even Robyn, his purported ally, his legally wedded wife, had left him. But before you thought Kody had reached rock bottom, Christine pulled out one more bombshell. A blow so explosive that it nearly broke what little defense he had remaining. Christine, unruffled as ever, raised the folder again. "Your Honor," she said, "I'd like to introduce into evidence the bank transfer records, signed by Mr. Brown himself." She passed the papers to the bailiff, who took them to the judge. The judge riffled through the pages, his eyebrows furrowing. These transfers, $75,000, transferred from a joint family account to an individual account in Mr. Brown's sole name. Kody's voice trembled. That was for business. That money was for the future of the family. Christine shook her head. "No, Kody, that money was for you, for your vacations, for your schemes that did not involve us. While our children struggled, while we scrambled bills, you lived a king in private." Kody pounded his fists on the table. "You don't know what it is like to bear the load of this family on your shoulders." The gavel crashed down on the judge's desk. "Enough, Mr. Brown. Sit down." Kody slumped back in his chair, his chest struggling to catch its breath. Then Janelle rose again, her voice firm but unbreakable. She produced a statement that had been written by one of their grown children. "My father forced me to have to choose between him and my mother. He said that being loyal to him would mean disconnecting from my siblings. I couldn't. I won't." The words cut deeper than a bank statement. They displayed not only financial infidelity, but emotional manipulation. A father ripping at the very fabric of his family. The gallery shifted uncomfortably. Some dabbed away tears. And Kody, he hid his face in his hands. Already, Kody's defense was disintegrating. But what occurred next assured once and for all, his authority over this family was lost. The judge leaned forward, his voice firm. "Mr. Brown, your wives have brought forth serious accusations. Financial abuse, emotional manipulation and dishonesty. Your reaction so far has been anger and blame. But anger doesn't wipe away evidence. Blame doesn't wipe away betrayal." Kody sat motionless, his lips quivering. For once, he had no quick spin, no grand oration, no practiced explanation. His silence spoke louder than his words ever could. The judge went on. "You might have been the head of this family once, but leadership is not domination. Leadership is trust. And that trust, Mr. Brown, seems to have been broken." The gallery erupted into whispers once more, the weight of the words settling. Kody collapsed into his seat, his shoulders heavy, his once burning eyes dull. His wives sat facing him. Together, their proof piled high, their stories unbreakable. He gazed at each of them individually. Christine, unfaltering. Janelle, serene but resolute. Meri, finally strong. Robyn, shattered but courageous. And for the first time, Kody Brown came to realize the truth. He wasn't in control anymore. The family he believed he could command had slipped out of his hands. The patriarch had fallen. But remember, this was only the third session. The real blow, the judge's warning, the verdict's shadow, was still to come. As the judge adjourned for the day, the courtroom buzzed with noise. Reporters rushed outside to deliver breaking news segments. Fans online flooded social media with hashtags. #Kody exposed, #sister wives, court, #justice for the wives. The wives departed the courtroom side by side, their chins held high, while Kody slumped in his chair, papers he could no longer manage strewn about him. The man who had once testified that he led by faith and love, was now best remembered for fury and denial. And session 3 concluded not with Kody's triumph, but with his breakdown. The courtroom was heavy with tension. After the long hours of testimony, accusations and explosive secrets, the silence that came afterwards weighed more than words. Kody Brown sat hunched in his chair, his now dimmed fiery eyes, his demeanor voicing defeat. His wives, Christine, Janelle, Meri and Robyn, sat in unison on the other side, shoulders braced, as one as never before. The judge pushed his glasses higher on his nose, the gavel clutched tightly in his hand. His face was inscrutable, but the chamber knew what was about to happen. All were leaning forward, reporters with pens in mid-air, onlookers with breath caught. And then the judge delivered his verdict. "Mr. Brown," the judge started, his tone firm, unruffled, but with an authority that ran the hair on backs of necks up. This court has heard hours of evidence. We've witnessed paperwork, transfers, emails, and the voices of your wives, which for years were never spoken. What we are uncovering here is not merely a TV show story. This is real life, real trust, and real betrayal. Kody's jaw grew tight. He glared down at the table, refusing to look at the judge. The judge went on to say, "It is evident that this family has been broken, not by situation, but by decisions. And those decisions, Mr. Brown, are yours." The room fell silent. Even the journalist's scribbling ceased. But the judge was just warming up. His words would not only rebuke Kody, they would take away the image he'd struggled to maintain for so many years. The judge leaned forward. "Leadership, Mr. Brown, is not control. It is not manipulation. Leadership is trust, sacrifice, and honesty. Qualities which, from the evidence presented here, you have consistently fallen short of." He pointed to the wives. "These women stood by your side for decades. They built lives with you, gave birth to your children, sacrificed careers, opportunities, and their own identities for a family that you vowed to take care of. Yet, the evidence indicates that rather than taking care of them, you took advantage of them." Kody shifted uncomfortably in his seat, his lips quivering as if he ached to say something. But the gravity of the judge's words weighed him down like shackles. The judge directed his attention at Christine. "You, Mrs. Brown, uncovered evidence of secret money that not only indicates dishonesty, but deception that erodes the very foundation of trust." Christine nodded slightly, her eyes brimming with tears, not of sadness, but of vindication. For years she had been painted as too emotional, the wife who couldn't handle the struggles of plural marriage. But here, in front of the judge, her emotions had translated into power. "Oh!" Kody looked at her, his jaw clenched, but held his peace. The judge turned to Janelle. "And you, Mrs. Brown, had shown emails that verify intentional efforts to remove your name from property records. That is not a miscommunication. That is intentional exclusion." Janelle sat straight, her peaceful composure never wavering. She had always been practical, looking to create stability for her children, invest smartly, and think about the long term. Being denied access to the land she invested money and hopes into wasn't only betrayal, it was theft. Kody's eyes flicked her way, then back down. Again, it wasn't only the financial records that shook the courtroom. The judge was on the verge of speaking to the emotional destruction, and this cut deeper than any ledger entry possibly could. The judge's gaze softened a little as he faced Meri. "You, Mrs. Brown, sent missives that indicate Mr. Brown's heart was elsewhere, and you were left feeling unwanted, unseen. That kind of abandonment and manipulation cannot be disregarded." Meri's lips trembled, but she held her chin high. For years she had lived in the shadows, labeled the forgotten wife. Today, the judge's words were a recognition that she mattered. Her gaze flashed momentarily to Kody. He dropped his eyes. At last, the judge turned to Robyn. "And you, Mrs. Brown, your evidence is the most poignant, because you, of all individuals, were regarded as his confidant, his lawful wife, his partner. And yet, even you confess you were deceived." Robyn's tears came freely, her body shaking. "I believed him," she said softly. "I stood up for him. I thought I was better than that. But I wasn't." The judge nodded. "And that, Mr. Brown, says it all. When even the wife whom you put above the rest gets up and testifies against you, it is obvious the truth is inescapable." Kody's hands trembled, his face flushed with shame and anger, but his silence gave lie to what his pride could not defeat. And then the warning. The moment that stilled even buzzing reporters. For the judge's words had a shadow about them that suggested repercussions far exceeding this courtroom. The judge stood tall, his voice taking on a stern note. "Mr. Brown, this court has not yet rendered its final decision. But let me make one thing plain. If the evidence keeps on favoring the accusations that have been made, you will suffer repercussions. Severe repercussions. Property, money, even custody arrangements could be rearranged in a way that you have no control over." The words strike Kody like a sledgehammer. Custody, property, finances, his three cornerstones of authority, all threatened. The judge's gavel came down once. "You are not above the law, Mr. Brown. You are not above being held accountable. The days of silence are over." The room broke out into whispers, the wives looking at one another with relief, even victory. Kody settled further into his chair, his breath short, his thoughts racing. Outside the courtroom, media outlets were already drafting headlines. Judge warns Kody Brown. Consequences loom in courtroom showdown. Sister wives patriarch sidelined from power in explosive hearing. Even Robyn turns. Kody confronts implosion of polygamist empire. The world that once believed he was the confident, charismatic head of a large family, was now coming to realize he was what his wives portrayed him as, a manipulator, a deceiver, a man who had defiled the basis of trust. But even as the judge made his threat, one thing was certain, this tale was far from over. The following session would see not only warnings, but the last strikes that would alter the Brown family's destiny forever. The judge had adjourned the session. Gavel sounded, echoing like thunder, sealing the moment in history. Reporters ran for the doors, waiting to send out the breaking news. Fans online went wild with comments, hashtags trending globally. Within the courtroom, Christine reclined in her chair, finally taking a breath. Janelle clenched her folder of documents, relief etching lines on her face. Meri closed her eyes, allowing one tear to slide, not sadness but relief. Robyn shook with fear, relying on the support of the women she once competed with. And Kody, he sat by himself, the force of the judge's words weighing down upon him like manacles of iron. For once the man who always had the last word, had nothing to say. The gavel slammed one final time as the judge returned to his seat. The weight of silence blanketed the courtroom. For hours, testimonies had ripped through the walls of this chamber. Christine's hidden bank account revelations, Janelle's property emails, Meri's heartbreaking evidence, Robyn's tearful betrayal. Kody Brown had lashed out, denied, pleaded, and collapsed in front of the world. Now only the judge's last words were left. Mr. Brown, the judge started, his voice firm and unyielding. This court has considered great evidence, and heard credible witnesses. The verdict is clear. The trust that held this family together has been broken, not by these women, but by your own hand. Kody paled. His lips parted in protest, but he made no sound. The courtroom was silent, save for the furious scratching of reporters' pens. The judge went on. This isn't just about money or property. This is about betrayal. You deceived your wives. You mishandled family finances. And you manipulated relationships to keep control. This is unacceptable, both as a husband and as a father. The words cut deeper than any punch. Kody's head fell into his hands. But the judge had more to say. What followed wasn't so much a warning. It was a redefinition of the Brown family's destiny. The judge leaned forward, his eyes tightening. One of the most upsetting aspects of this case has been the testimony about your children. Testimony indicates you tried to force loyalty by having them pick between parents. This court is not going to allow that sort of manipulation. The gallery gasped. A few reporters shook their heads in shock. This court orders that custody decisions will prioritize the children's well-being. Manipulation, favoritism and coercion will no longer dictate their lives. The voices of your children will be heard, and they will not be pawns in your conflicts. Tears overflowed in Christine's eyes. Janelle breathed a sigh of relief. Meri covered her mouth with her hand, softly crying. Even Robyn, whose wife Kody used to put above everyone, closed her eyes and nodded. Their children had been sandwiched for years between the family's turmoil. Now, for the first time, they were shielded. The judge shuffled the pile of papers. The deeds to the property, the bank transactions, the secret accounts. His tone became stern. As for the issue of money and property, this court finds there is adequate evidence that Mr. Brown willfully sought to hide money and change property arrangements. This cannot be forgiven. Kody's attorney shifted uncomfortably, whispering hysterically, but the judge lifted his gavel. Those accounts belonging to the Brown family will be reviewed by this court. Assets will be put on hold until equitable distribution is decided. That ownership of real property at Coyote Pass will be re-examined, and any additional evidence of fraudulently transacted transfers will be met with criminal charges. The courtroom was filled with gasps. Criminal charges. The words hung suspended, like a storm cloud. Kody's eyes went wide, panic flashing across his face. His empire wasn't cracking. It was disintegrating. But the worst part was coming. Because the judge was about to take away the last remaining bit of authority Kody believed he still possessed. His image as the leader of the family. The judge stared Kody straight in the eye. His tone sliced through the room, like a knife. You came in as a leader, Mr. Brown. But leadership isn't about control. It's about responsibility. Responsibility to your wives, to your children, to the family you decided to make. And on what I've listened to in this courtroom, you defaulted on that responsibility. Kody struggled to swallow. His throat parched, his once proud stance slumped and shattered. Abused trust. You took advantage of loyalty. You put yourself first among those you profess to love. That is not leadership. That is self-absorbedness masquerading as authority. The wives sat frozen, their gaze on the man who had once dictated their lives. For years they had tolerated his favoritism, his neglect, his arrogance. And now, at last, someone in power was speaking words they had longed to hear. As the judge's words hung in the air, Christine reached out and touched Janelle's hand lightly. Janelle, her turn, looked over at Meri, who nodded barely perceptibly. Robyn, her face wet with tears, moved closer to Christine. For the first time in years, the four women weren't fragmented. They weren't competitors. They weren't struggling over scraps of attention. They were together, shoulder to shoulder, as women who discovered their voices. Murmurs filled the courtroom. Cameras snapped quickly. The photo was compelling. Four wives who had once been held together by rivalry, now standing shoulder to shoulder in defiance of the man who had sought to control them. All outside the courthouse, though the world was waiting. The headlines would relate the tale, but what no headline could convey was the expression on Kody Brown's face as the judge delivered the coup de grace. The judge raised his gavel for the third and final time. This is not the final judgment, but let me be unequivocal. If the evidence remains consistent with the testimonies here, this court will have no alternative but to find in favor of the plaintiffs. That would include property restructuring, financial restructuring, and custody restructuring. Mr. Brown, your actions will not go unpunished. Harshly, the gavel came down. Kody winced. His chest rose and fell with a series of short gasps. His breathing labored. For once, the man who always had the final say remained quiet. Christine stood upright, tears running down her cheeks, but a smile spreading. Janelle let out a deep breath, as though a burden had finally been removed. Meri wiped away her tears, her eyes sparkling with courage. Robyn leaned against the group, no longer the stranger, but a member of the togetherness. And Kody Brown? He sat by himself. The patriarch had toppled. As the judge recessed, the courtroom erupted into cacophony. Reporters surged out the doors to bring breaking news. Fans online went wild with hashtags. #Kody Brown. Exposed #Sister Wives. Court #Justice. For the wives outside. Microphones flashed as the wives ascended the courthouse steps together. Christine led off, her voice firm. This isn't about revenge. This is about truth. For years we lived in silence. That ends today. Janelle supplemented, we want justice. We want fairness. And we want our children to know their mothers stood with them. Meri, usually the quietest, addressed the cameras. We weren't weak. We were silenced. But today we were heard. Even Robyn, still dabbing at her tears, had a word. I defended him so long. But I see now. I wasn't defending love. I was defending control. And that ends now. The crowd on the sidewalk outside cheered. But the tale did not conclude on those courthouse steps. This was not merely the fall of Kody Brown's empire. It was the start of a new thing, a future reimagined. When the wives turned away from the courthouse, side by side, the sense of closure hung in the air. The empire that Kody had built, a kingdom of polygamy, domination and manipulation, was crumbling stone by stone. Within, Kody stayed at the defense table, his attorney wildly whispering words of strategy, appeals, damage control. But Kody did not hear. His eyes were far away, vacant. For the first time in his life, the man who lived for attention, whose existence was constructed on being the focus of the tale, was no longer the hero. He was the villain, and the world would never view him in the same way again. The judge's sentence had sealed it. Betrayal comes at a price. Kody Brown had played patriarch for years, but when the truth was pulled into the light of day, his wives united against him. united and stronger than they ever were alone. The Brown family would never remain the same. The showdown in the courtroom did not only reveal Kody, but also liberated the women who once dwelled under his darkness. And to the millions of people watching worldwide, one message echoed loud. The era of silence was over.